Today's episode is titled When Florida State Let Go. In this alternate universe, in 1993, Florida State made a decision that felt reasonable at the time. They let Bobby Bowden walk away. Not because the program was failing, not because the wins stopped coming, but because Florida State believed it had reached a point where the institution needed more control than any one person. That's the decision, and everything that follows flows from it. Florida State in the early 1990s wasn't chasing relevance, it already had it. What the school believed it was solving was dependency. Bowden's program worked, maybe too well. Recruiting, culture, loyalty, even patience, it all ran through one man. From the inside, that starts to feel risky. Administrators didn't see collapse coming, they saw fragility, so the logic was simple. What happens to Florida State when this eventually ends? The answer, they decided, was to end it on their terms. The replacement wasn't a panic hire, it wasn't unserious. Florida State brought in Mike Ditka, and in 1993 that made sense. Big name, championship resume, authority. The belief was that Florida State didn't need nurturing anymore, it needed structure, that the culture was already built and now it just had to be managed. But almost immediately something felt off. Not in the win-loss column, not in the headlines. It was more subtle than that. Recruiting felt colder. Player relationships felt more transactional. The program still won, but it stopped breathing the same way. Florida State didn't lose its identity overnight, it hardened. And when a program hardens, it stops adapting. Meanwhile, Bowden didn't retire. He landed at USC. USC in the early 90s wasn't broken, it was merely unfocused. Sanctions, drift, prestige without gravity. What USC believed it was solving was stability. Bowden brought the opposite of what Florida State thought it no longer needed: trust, continuity, patience. At USC, that fit. The Trojans didn't suddenly dominate, they didn't flip the sport. They just became solid again. And in college football, stability compounds. Back in Tallahassee, Florida State didn't implode. That's important. The program stayed relevant, stayed ranked, stayed respected, but it lost something harder to define. It stopped feeling inevitable. Close games felt heavier. Margins mattered more. The sense that Florida State would figure it out slowly disappeared. The school had solved one problem, dependence, but created another, detachment. As the late 90s turned into the BCS era, that distinction starts to matter. USC entered that era already organized, already calm. Florida State entered it searching for a new internal balance. The solution came in 1998 with Jim Donnan. Not a Bowden clone, not a revolution, a stabilizer. Florida State didn't try to rewind history, it tried to modernize without surrendering control. And that worked, mostly. The program regained structure, recruiting normalized, the floor rose again. But the ceiling was different now. At the national level, something larger was brewing. The sport was quietly choosing sides. The SEC watches all of this closely. USC's stability, Florida State's volatility, the BCS favoring brands that felt safe. The SEC didn't want to be interesting, it wanted to be avoidable. That's why in 2007, Nick Saban lands at Alabama. Alabama wasn't chasing glory, it was chasing permanence. What Alabama believed it was solving was chaos, and it solved it completely. From that point on, college football tilts, not towards one coach, but towards a model: control, process, and repeatability. USC post Bowden chose restraint. Florida State chose balance. Alabama chose domination through structure. None of those choices were irrational, but they produced very different futures. When NIL becomes public around 2017, it doesn't change the sport, it exposes it. Programs that already had alignment, they thrive. Programs that relied on tradition, they struggle. Alabama absorbs NIL seamlessly. Ohio State matches it structurally. Clemson finds a window through continuity. The Pac-12 tries to govern it collaboratively and stalls, which brings us to the final fracture. In 2022, USC leaves the Pac-12, not in anger, but not in desperation, but in certainty. What USC believed it was solving was security. The Pac-12 hadn't failed competitively, it failed to choose a direction. And in a sport now driven by contracts, uncertainty is bad. Once USC moves, the rest follow quietly. Not loudly, no central villain, just gravity. By the mid-2020s, college football doesn't crown a new dynasty. It finalizes a structure. Two conferences matter most. A few programs anchor them. Everyone else adjusts. And all of it traces back to moments like 1993. Moments where a school looks at success and asks, is this still ours? Florida State thought it was solving dependence. USC thought it was solving drift. Alabama thought it was solving chaos. None of them were wrong, but none of them could see how control, once shifted, never really goes back. Because the most important decisions in college football aren't about winning championships, they're about who the program belongs to. And once you answer that question, and everything else follows, whether you intended to or not. And if you enjoy this kind of story, where the decision matters more than the scoreboard, go ahead and like the video. It helps this reach people who care about how programs actually work. If you see this decision differently or think the shift happened somewhere else, leave a comment. I read all of them and they shape what stories come next. And if you want more college football history told through institutional choices and not hot takes, subscribe. This channel lives in the moments where things quietly change.